fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark.
From the great void in space came a sound, a word. The word is God, and the universe was created. Everything in existence is the result of a frequency designed to create shapes and matter in the right form to create galaxies, stars, planets, life. We are a collective consciousness, united in one under the same frequency. Sound affects all of nature and everything in the universe. It only takes your perception to see these frequencies and discover another perception within this world.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Bigger Picture Podcast. My name is Chris. Over here we got Sean, aka The Seeker.
What's up?
I got the air drums today. One stick. So today we got cymatics, vibrations, and dimensions.
Kind of fitting that you only have the one stick, maybe? Should have had two. We should have planned this better. We do have a drum in the studio, but I don't want just to go straight to the jump. But it would have been awesome if we actually planned this a little bit better and we had you playing a drum where we were to throw on some sand and actually get one of those vibrations. Why didn't we think of that?
We're half-assed dorks.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
We're just having a good time.
Well, we fucked up on that one, but maybe next time. Maybe next time we do something like this. Maybe we'll just do like an extra video of doing that. That'd be kind of fun.
We start doing like pre-episodes before we do an episode.
Like extra B-roll.
Like dorks.
Just for the fun of it. Yeah, or just for an example purpose.
I mean...
It'd be fun to actually do that, but what we're talking about, we kind of got ahead of ourselves here, is cymatics. So, cymatics would be the type of frequency a wave emits, and generally cymatics is also referred to as the shape and the sound of the sound it makes. So, like, Chris, you were a musician. Does this have any bearing on music whatsoever?
I would say the only possible bearing is recent. I think in the last like 10 years, it was like discovered that certain notes or frequencies, which that's all a note is just a different frequency, affect like the mind and the human body in a different way. Like,
yeah, I remember hearing something like that. Well, there's always been like for the military is like the brown note. You hear about that where they
the trumpet, I think it is.
Well, yeah, they try to make you poop for like crowd control. But they would shoot. And I even think it was on MythBusters, I think, at one point in time where they try to do it like they would send different notes from speakers to try to hit a frequency in your stomach to make your stomach upset to make you poop. And
one of those guys wanted to poop. It was like totally
it was called the brown note, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And so like they did an example where like heavy metal or something, you know, which has like lower, darker like tones, had a more like slower like wave, like,
right,
frequent, scientifically speaking, and tended to make people like a little less happy. Whereas a pop song or something with happier.
There was also something I remember seeing too, where rock and metal music will actually, while listening to it in the car, will make you drive faster because of either the pace, the beat, or the frequency, or something like that. But it also increases testosterone. So that's why you always have the stereotype of that, you know, the bro in the truck with like heavy metal on, you know, and he's fucking flipping you off at the, oh, get out of the way. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So a little bit of truth to that, maybe.
Oh, God.
But
I mean, I think there's total truth in that, and that is just again a testament to some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with this, I didn't really know much about this, and like you were talking about this before to me, and I didn't quite grasp it, and then I started doing my research on it, and I kept going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and I don't know how deep we're going to go today, but there is some fascinating stuff. Like if we go through some stuff pretty quick, we might be able to do that. So at the top of the show, I mentioned that Cymatics is the sound or the visual of the wave itself, the frequency itself. Mm-hmm. And I do have some images that I pulled up here on Google. These are some of the plates, and I think this is from Ernst Chandni, Chladni, maybe, I don't know. It's a German.
I'm gonna guess it's
Chladni. So Ernst Chladni was a German physicist and musician, and what he was doing is he was putting sand on metal plates, and then he would have a violin, yeah, and he would take the bow of the violin and string it across down through the metal plate, causing these, I guess, images to appear where it would appear much like the image you're seeing on the screen right now.
Different shapes,
different kind of patterns. And he noticed that the higher the frequency or the higher the pitch of the bow, the more extravagant the image was. These were, they started getting like, some of these later ones here in the list are, they're beautiful. They're, symmetrically perfect. And that is the actual, I guess, 2D representation of the actual wave itself, right? So there was a guy that kind of took it a little bit further. It's Hans Jenny. He's a physician and a natural scientist. He kind of took it a little bit step further, and I think these are his actual plates. Though these are Hans Jenny's plates, but it's based off of Ernst Chandni's early work. And he was the one that actually set it up to a tonoscope, which is the electronic version of the bow and string. Yeah. And he was able to hit frequencies of much higher magnitude than a bow could. But the cool thing about it is every frequency had its own unique pattern to it. Yeah. Almost like a fingerprint. Like it had a purpose to that frequency.
Yeah, and it wasn't like coincidental by any means. Like if he turned it to a different frequency and then went back to the original frequency he had it at, it would go back to that pattern.
Right.
It was the same pattern.
Yeah. It wasn't like just, it created because the slant of the speaker or whatever. It was that way. It's what the wave is putting out. It's the actual physical wave where the nodes are and the antinodes are. So the sand is where the antinodes are, where the plate is not moving. So if you would imagine,
so cool.
Yeah, if you would imagine like a bell, right? And you ring a bell, the bell vibrates in certain areas, but some of it stays still. It's generally the top where it's hanging from is more still than the bottom of it. And the bigger the bell, the bigger the ring. So similar to where you have a flat plate, if you were to hit a plate, generally the entire plate's not going to vibrate all at the same time. You might have a section on the left, section on the right, maybe top and bottom, and it makes one of those like cloverleaf style patterns. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to try to find a video real quick to kind of demonstrate. I remember seeing this a couple days ago where he was changing the frequency and then trying to get...
there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, it should be pretty easy to pick up. Oh no, this one's actually pretty fucking cool. So this is just an ad here, but one of the coolest things about this is, so through the years, people have been doing these different experiments with it. Like they were using like sand, some people use powder. I found this video the other day. They were using water, and you're not going to quite see the actual wave itself, but the way they do it is they're making everything visible. And here, I'm going to cut to that right now. So they're making all the waves visible that they're doing. So right there, as you can see the plate and how it's changing frequency. And
with a keyboard, that's cool.
Yeah. Oh no, it gets awesome with the drums and everything like that. So for anyone that wants to watch this video, it's Cymatics, Science versus Music. It's Nigel, Stanford. You got to check this out. It's really cool. So this is a good example right here of the frequencies being changed.
I lost you in the meeting.
Oh no.
It just booted me. Should I try to rejoin?
Yep, rejoin. So you can see here, they're going through the different frequencies, and you can see how it's changing in real time. And then on the speaker, the music that's playing through the speaker, you could visualize the actual waves, the water moving and creating it.
Yes, I've seen this. This is fucking cool.
Right? And wait till they get to the bass drum. This is it right here. I hope this is the bass drum. So they have water pouring out of the bass drum, and you could see the wave. How cool is this? Right?
What the fuck?
Yeah. All right, we can't play too much of that because we're going to get banned by YouTube. But Cymatics, Science versus Music, Nigel Stanford. Check it out. I'll link it in the show notes. Awesome video.
Whoa.
This is one of the ones that I just stumbled upon because I was like, oh yeah, I just want to try to see if I can find something for the show. And that actually just showed it even better than I could ever imagine, because it showed the plate, the exact plate that Hans Jenny used, right? But it also showed the water, and when it came out of that bass, out of the speaker, when he was kicking the bass there, the bass drum, and you saw that wave, like it was stuck in midair.
It changed the water to like a spiral
Yes.
for a second.
So
that was crazy.
It captured the water, meaning something was supporting the water, meaning it was in the channel of whatever that somatic frequency is.
I gotta go off air and just go watch this video, guys. So I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. I'm not
But
going anywhere.
that kind of leads us more into the further spiritual side of this now. Mm-hmm. Seeing that water being moved and manipulated in midair, where anytime you've ever seen water come off a spout, it always goes down. Mm-hmm. It could arc a little bit based on the water pressure, right? But it always goes down. There's no way it ever goes side to side and then goes
Loops
down.
like that.
Yeah,
that
was
like a slinky ring.
Yes, yeah, like a spring, right? Like an uncoiled spring almost. It was just like it was amazing, and you have to start to think, okay, what kind of power does sound have?
Yes, and that's the point of it. Like, because sound is just vibration, right?
Yeah.
Because when you vibrate something, it emits a sound or a frequency. So, sound is like... This is weird to talk about, because the way we think of sound is like, it's like, oh, if I didn't have hearing, I wouldn't experience sound.
Right, but it's not
but
true.
Like Beethoven, for example,
yep,
perfect example, like he still was experiencing sound even with being deaf.
Right, because he can feel it. And a lot of people that are deaf can say they feel the music. They can feel, like they actually can feel the different frequencies.
So
and different instruments at that too.
Stick with me here for a second. I'm gonna like dip into the rabbit hole.
Let's go.
This.
Let's do it.
I don't want to lose it. Okay, so sound is this profound thing that we're talking about right now. It's created the freaking water to turn into a spiral, all right? It's able to manipulate. Now let's move on to a different sense. Let's move on to sight or something. Double slit experiment. German physicist does a double slit experiment with light photons. He discovers that light photons behave differently when they're being observed than when they're not being observed. So, which basically puts your sense of sight into question in my eyes. Is that it?
Yeah, right there. It's a GIF of the double slit, meaning the waves on the bottom half of the image going towards the wall that has two slits in it.
Yeah.
If you notice how they're making these ripples, the waves are kind of going off.
Yep.
But the center point for all the connecting waves is always the same. So it's based on the perception of the observer where it hits, meaning it's completely up to the observer, because the waves will continue on till infinity at a point, but it's up to the observer to have that third reference point, that singular point to observe it at. So that's why the twin slit experiment doesn't quite work without an observer, because it's infinity and one at the exact same time. Yeah.
He put like strange high-tech cameras to try and observe it from a different angle, right? And that's when it behaves differently.
Well, it doesn't matter where they put it. It always ends up being like sporadic, because you can even have the same observer in the same spot and still observe a different outcome. Because it's not always, because you got to think of it as like, it's almost like a shotgun blast, right? So if you shoot a shotgun, it has all little BBs inside it, and it has a pattern that spreads out. Let's say you're a 3D shotgun wave shooting at a 2D world that's observing. So you shoot at a shotgun, boom, hits a target, only one BB hits the bullseye at a time. The rest of the BBs were there, but you only can observe that one BB at a time, because that's technically how you're observing that particular particle moving through.
There.
If that makes any sense.
That was a good metaphor. Good job.
All right.
So then, let's move on to sense of touch. So we know that nothing is ever actually touching.
No.
It's just forces repelling.
Which is the strangest thing ever.
Yeah,
like,
nothing is touching. I am not sitting on this bench. I'm
You're
floating on this bench.
It makes zero sense whatsoever. That took me a while to get my head wrapped around, because yes, and when you move objects, you're not actually physically moving them. It's the
it's the
atoms
energy of your
repelling
body. Yes, repelling something else. Like me holding this pen.
Yes, it's crazy.
I'm controlling it I'm not touching this. It's just I'm containing it within my energy.
Yeah, but obviously this is on a nano level, or even atomic level, right? Atomic level.
It's like nothing we can observe, basically. Just, through math and physics we discovered this. Wait, what is this? Things you can actually touch?
Nah, it's a good image of how illustration, where like, obviously this is off the famous painting from I think it's Michelangelo, where the fingers are touching, but they're not actually really touching, and this kind of shows that like, oh yeah, there's actual waves and frequencies and forces in between fingers, but it's just a good way of depicting it, because obviously trying to figure it out here's actually a good example right here.
Your chair?
Yeah. I'll just pull it up in the news right there. So courtesy of Vsauce, that's another great YouTube channel, but yeah, so you're never actually sitting, or you're never actually touching anything, because they're the subatomic essentially molecules there will never touch, because they have to repel. So you're technically floating on it, but to us in our normal 1G world that we live in, we're sitting on the chair. Touching.
This goes for everything, like atoms in general.
Oh yeah.
Like atoms are never actually touching.
No,
either. Like,
because of the strong and the weak nuclear force keep them moving.
Technically,
everything's always moving.
We're just mostly empty space.
Yes and
yes
no.
And no. We're like half empty space, half particles.
Right. Yeah. However, our mass is different. Yeah.
Here,
we need a physicist on this damn show.
Yeah, we do.
Like a real one.
Can you become a physicist by next week?
Yeah, I'll print out my degree online.
Just smoke the right weed.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting idea, and one of the things that when we were talking about this earlier, where we were saying like the atoms, like the strong and the weak nuclear force is that a frequency, or is that a sound? Like, could that be actually thought of as a sound, where the molecules that are going around the nucleus, right? Like the little particles that are going around the nucleus, they have to be moving by some kind of a force, right? They're not perpetual. There's something's moving around. It's the strong and weak, nuclear force is what we know it in science. But could that be a type of frequency, and could that frequency have a sound?
I think they're the same thing.
Right, and you mentioned, you kind of going a little bit further and say, could you change the frequency of that?
Of that particular, alter it.
Yeah, of that atom, and make it into something different.
Well.
Or use it in a different way.
If you find the frequency, let's say the frequency is A, and the opposite of that frequency, like the exact opposite of that frequency is B, whatever, and you put those things together, and you create. And again, I'm not a physicist. These are just things that I've watched videos on or read articles or just really nerdy stuff about, because I find it very interesting. You create, if I'm not mistaken, it creates a weird space because you're canceling out the frequency in that particular area. So everything's frequency everywhere.
Right.
And if I could find the frequency of the frequencies, I'm sure there's many frequencies in this room right now, and have all the opposites, like, aimed at this room of those frequencies, I don't even know what would happen. But there's a lot of theory that that's how anti-gravity works, and high speed, flying saucers or anything like that, like, because they create this void in the wavelengths in front of them that just allows them to just zip through it. I can't explain it, but I encourage you, the viewers, to do your research on it, because it's very interesting.
Right, and when I was kind of like looking into this too, this is one of the cool things that I found. There's like these experiments that this guy doing. He's using acoustic levitation, and this is kind of what you were referring to, where he's using sound to essentially suspend droplets in midair. And I was kind of thinking about this, and I was like, okay, if you could do this with water, could you do this with something heavier? Could you do this with, maybe a small pod, and then find different frequencies and maybe go even bigger to a spaceship or something like that? Like, is it possible? Because you always hear the stories of, and this kind of goes back to last week when we were talking about the extraterrestrials, is you always have a similar storyline. Like, they see the craft, they hear a low hum, but it's not really making any noise, right? Is that a frequency they're using to kind of separate themselves, just like they're holding these water droplets in air? Like, could it actually be suspending their own selves, like shooting a type of frequency and kind of bouncing it off the ground, be able to kind of levitate the craft or whatever? Right?
I think that's absolutely possible. Absolutely.
It's one of those cool things that it's like the what ifs. It sounds plausible, right? It's not science fiction, because that video just showed there you can levitate matter.
Those are just small.
Right.
Small light objects.
And if you could do that on a small scale, why not try to...
Like, look at the thing that they were using to, like, create the frequency. It's a small, like, little box.
Yeah.
If you had something way more powerful that had maybe monatomic gold as the conductors,
some type of, like,
100% power in, 100% power out, you could probably generate something much stronger and move bigger objects.
Or you can even
totally
loop it and magnify it, too, and create it even larger.
Yeah.
Right? Because isn't that part of it, too?
You're a fucking idiot if you don't think it's possible. Like, quite frankly.
And it's weird, because, like, when you approached me for this subject, I was just kind of like, is there really enough on this subject to fill the show?
It's never ending.
It really isn't. It really isn't, because now I want to take a step further, and because this is the bigger picture, right? And we have to try to cover as much of the entire picture as we can. And have you ever heard of the Coral Castle?
Yes.
So I'm going to pull up a couple images of the Coral Castle. So there was this guy in Florida.
And he made it, right?
He made a coral castle, yes. He made a castle out of limestone coral. It's like very, very large rocks. And he supposedly done it all by himself. And the story goes that some kid saw him, like, moving, because he had everything blocked off by these large, like, barricades and gates and things like that. And he was trying to conceal how he made, like, the castle and did all these different feats of moving these large stones around. And one kid said that he saw him kind of, I don't know, levitating, or he had, like, the stone slab on something, and he was just, like, pushing it with, like, one hand at ease, and it was just moving across. So obviously this is just one little kid that is said to kind of have his levitation device thing there. And the creator of this castle actually even said he always comes out and says like it's easy if you know how to do it, hinting at he has some special device or whatever. And then in like another interview, he mentioned that there was like, you know, electromagnetic devices that he was using to levitate these bricks. But these are just some quick pictures of the castle, and you can see how large these stones are. Like you can see compared
Some of them are huge.
to the door. Yeah, it's large. They're not as heavy as they appear to be because it is coral, so it's porous. So it's not like you know, it's not like a granite stone where it'll be, you know, a block like that would be like 100 tons.
It's not the pyramids.
But they're still saying there's stones as large as 17 tons. So these are just some. I went the wrong way. Some images. And this is like the inner things that he carved out, and he had like benches and a bunch of different carvings. This is actually the creator of the castle. However, it's been debunked over the years, saying that he did have a crane and he just kind of placed them in the spot. But he did mine all the coral himself, and nobody really knew how he did that. But he built it over 17 years, so it's not like it's something that isn't. It's feasible for one man to do if you had modern equipment. It was built like in the 30s, so he did have cranes and things like that. But it kind of harks back to the stories of, you know, the Egyptians or like the Mayans. How did they make these large, you know, stone structures?
Well,
and
let me touch upon that real quick.
All right.
I was just thinking about that because if you think about the Egyptian and the Mayan, whichever civilizations, they were a very united people.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't.
Well, there were wars between tribes, but later on.
Yeah. But when they were flourishing, you know what I mean? When the Mayan pyramids were built and when the Egyptian pyramids were built, I doubt that was happening while they were at war with each other. Like that wouldn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those workers would be warriors. So, if all these people can get together and, you know, we watched a short video before we started today's podcast, and there was a section that alluded to if you arrange drums, horns, and men like doing their ohms very precisely and specifically. Oh, I just hit my mic. Sorry. You can potentially levitate, you know, bricks and boulders and stuff. Now.
Yeah, it was like Tibetan monks, right?
Yeah.
And then they would, like you said, they would arrange it in a certain.
Like very precise.
Like very precise. Like every person, even like their head must have been like very
yes.
precise way, and they'll do these chants or a certain like chant for a frequency.
And after about 5 minutes,
they could move some stone. Yeah.
It could move a stone.
I wonder if there's any video for that.
Now let's think about the entire, you know, Cairo, like, you know, Egyptian civilization, like all doing that. If you could get the whole civilization to do that, because they all know the power that's in it.
It'd be a few thousand people.
Yeah, like why couldn't you? I mean, the video we were watching about the Tibetan monks only said like 150 something men, right? Like if you had thousands and thousands of people, like 2,000, 3,000 people, all doing it, you're just increasing the power of whatever force you're trying to generate. So why couldn't the pyramids be built that way? I just feel like if you just fucking think about some of this shit, you can figure out a pretty plausible like conclusion.
All right, I'm gonna take your idea and I'm gonna blow your mind with it. Ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Is this the bomb you're gonna drop?
This is one of the bombs.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it will tie in all together, but
all right.
This is gonna be a bombshell. I haven't told them about this yet, and I found this out just last night because I was doing some more research for the show, and I stumbled upon something that is fucking amazing. And if this is real, and if somebody can connect this, both of these things together, this could be huge. Like this could be revolutionary. So episode 1, we talked about Anunnaki, right? A little bit about that, a little bit about Nibiru. Mm-hmm. And then episode 2, we talked more about the Anunnaki, more of the race and extraterrestrials, right? But on both shows, we had a tablet, right? And
What do you mean, like? Oh yeah.
like one of those tablets, right? You can't cheat. I'm not going to show you just yet. So one of that tablet that you just saw flash on that screen, right?
Yeah.
We're going to bring it back for the 3rd episode. just because it all kind of ties together to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And one thing that, remember, we were pondering, we were trying to dissect the scene a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And trying to figure out like what was what. Remember that thing in the middle?
Yeah, on the arc.
Yeah.
Or the box thing.
All right, so take a look at this, right?
Didn't we already talk about this?
A little bit.
It's Cymatics. Like,
yeah. So notice that let's see if I can zoom in here. Here we go. So the center part of this here, that little shield area, almost is like a plate. It's one of those like the chandelier plates, right?
Yeah.
Where they're maybe playing a certain frequency, and maybe that frequency has something to do with that kind of triangle in the background. You can see like almost like a beam coming down.
Yeah.
Like, is that like representative of like a sound wave? Like that's like a force going out, and then the actual plate itself is showing you the frequency. Because if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that's the chandelier plate at the bottom, how it has it's similar patterns. It's a star pattern where you have
which
a
is
north
that on this page that you had all those different chandelier?
on this one here.
Yeah, is that
maybe, I don't know. I don't see it. But you can get it because that picture is actually not the source that I got it from. This is actually a better example of what the original person showed. It just I started to think of like, okay, maybe is that person on the right hand side of that tablet, that giant person, could he be the Anunnaki telling the three little human people, hey, here's a device with a Cymatic thing, here's the sound signature, create this and you can move objects just like we can. Right? Maybe because they're larger, like, yeah, you need help. Okay, here's a little device to help you, and here it is. They wrote it down in stone. It's got to have some significance because it's there in stone. Right. Right? So I want to take this one step further.
Has the bomb even dropped yet?
A little bit.
Okay.
That was the launch of it, and then we're gonna go. So remember you were talking about the guy on the right was a giant.
Yeah.
And remember you were saying around this time there's always been stories of giants, and the literal myths of it was there were people that were physically much taller than we are. So you see the object that he's holding in his hand?
Yeah, it looks like
it's like a circle with a line to the right of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting about it, if you look at this right here, this is a rune stone. So this is from the Norse mythology, and it's a similar symbol. And if you look at some of the other symbols on the page, more notably the one under the large symbols there, the transliteration is the line with the circle.
Yeah.
Look what the translation of the photogeometic in the Old Norse is. I don't know, can you see it from your screen? Right here. Giant. So I don't know. Could it be a connection? Like, could that have been the symbolism for whatever the Sumerian writing would be? Because
so he would be holding the symbol of giant?
Or maybe whatever he's holding is something important to the giants. Because in Norse mythology, they also had giants. So could there be a connection? Because you got to remember, what is the we talked about it last week on some of the races of the extraterrestrials, right? There's the Norse-looking giants. They're like 7 to like 12 feet tall, whatever. They're Norse-looking, right? So if they're Norse-looking, maybe it's this. Maybe they've kind of traveled around the world, and maybe they've seen like other people, or maybe even Northern Europeans are descendants of those. Maybe a hybrid civilization of the Norse. But every culture has a myth about giants.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know. It was just something that kind of came in a little bit, like it was just weird because it came out of like left field. I was like, what?
I love where your head's at. I'm excited to go home and actually research that more.
Right, but it's almost another avenue to validate what everyone's been saying all this time. Right?
I mean, most of this stuff is.
It comes together. It comes together quite often. And
yeah.
It always does.
All the things that we talk about, are intertwined. Like that book that I told you to read.
Yep.
It's literally like what that phrase that I just said in a book. It's like all these different things, like alien races, vibrations, cymatics, the sacred geometry, like dimensions, like it's all that in that one book, but it like correlates all of them.
Yeah, it does a pretty good job at doing it. Although,
highly recommend it.
let me pull up the title of that because I just finished it not that long ago too.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I finished it. Oh yeah, it's
I didn't even know you had started. You made it sound like you hadn't got to it yet.
Yeah, I finished it yesterday. So it's nothing in this book is true, but it's exactly. Oh, hold on, now I missed the title.
This is audible.
Oh, stop it.
This is audible.
This is audible. I don't even know what
It's nothing in this book is true, but it's exactly how things are. It's by Bob Frissell, right?
Yep.
That's the one, right?
Rissell.
SSELL.
SSELL.
Two S's, two
There's
L's.
a double in there somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent book.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I got it on Audible, like you just heard there. So, I don't know. My chroma key's getting a little freaky.
Yeah, I
must. I think I bumped it.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's back to normal.
Yep, I fixed it. Fixed it with vibrations.
So yeah, I mean, God, how do we loop this into dimensions? In my brain, a dimension is another state of being.
Correct. Yes.
Not
so
necessarily another place.
We're not talking the mathematical. The third dimension is 3 points. The fourth dimension would be the time. We're not talking the mathematical dimensions as you would perceive in geometry.
No, yeah, we're talking about. You know what? Let's quickly get into personal experience because we wanted to do that in past shows and we never got to it.
Right.
Sean, I want you, if you're comfortable to share that experience you shared with me, because in my mind, you could have experienced a different dimension.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go into a little bit. So, I don't know. It was just nothing particular about the day, really, to be honest with you. It was more or less typical normal day. I don't know. For whatever reason, I was really tired that day. I decided to just lay down. And I remember laying down, belly down on the mattress. So belly down, face down into the pillow. And I remember I remember laying there and then kind of like drifting, letting my mind kind of like think, but still kind of drift off and not think at the same time.
Yeah,
complete relaxation. And to me, it felt like maybe less than a minute. And all of a sudden, I was sleeping. And then maybe like 10 seconds after I felt like I was sleeping, like all of a sudden just whoosh, I pulled out of my body. And it was the weirdest feeling because I remember pulling out my body at the foot of my bed, standing up at the foot of my bed, seeing myself laying there, like face down, like exactly how I just did 5 minutes ago. And then it was very odd the way I felt. It didn't feel any danger. Like I couldn't tell. Like I was like, oh, maybe I'm dreaming. Maybe this is something out of like ordinary. But I could clearly see myself. I could see myself even like breathing. Like I'm moving. Like you could see me moving. It's not like a still image or like a picture in my head. It was me living, breathing, sleeping right there. But then as I started looking around, I started kind of seeing not like ripples, but almost like a shimmer, like a shine. But it wasn't really like strong, and you can kind of see something like on the wall. So I kind of looked at the wall, and the configuration of my bedroom is the bed is kind of in the center of the room, and there's a wall on either side. So if you're standing at the foot of the bed and you put your arms straight out either way, there's a wall to my right, there's a wall to my left. So I remember kind of like looking at the wall to my right and seeing the like kind of like a shine or a shimmer or just something kind of like glazed by, like kind of like almost telling me like, hey, there's something over here. So oh, that's weird. So I go to like try to touch it, and when I go to touch it, it almost like is like liquid. It's almost like it's not hard. It wasn't a hard like surface. It
like stay on your face.
No.
Just kinda go in and, like,
it's almost like like not like silly putty, but like the slime nowadays, like kids are playing around with it.
Yeah.
You stick your finger into it, but nothing sticks to you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but I felt like I could go into it. Like it was infinitely deep. I never like felt resistance to it. So as I'm poking through it, I kind of like went back a little bit. And that was weird, and I just all of a sudden just shoved my arm through it, and up to my elbow, my hand is through the wall. I'm like, that's really weird.
Can you see your hand?
No. It's like in the wall. So like imagine like, sticking your hand through like a cardboard box, and then you can see the box on the outside, but you can't see your hand, but your arm is clearly through a hole, right? So I could put my hand through it, and I started like thinking, I was like, okay, that's weird. Let's just go in. And I just remember kind of going in, like following my own arm into the wall, and then all of a sudden it's the wall that faces the outside of my house. So now I'm through the entire wall, but I'm outside of the house, and I look to my left, and I see the roof and the outside wall where I just went through. And I was like, that's really weird. But my bedroom's on the second floor. So then I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, that's really weird. Like, that's the second floor. Like, how could I go through like a door or go through something and still be there? Like, you'd think I'd fall. So then I look down. I'm over my driveway. I could see my cars. I could see all the kids' toys in the yard. And it's so vivid, as if like I'm just standing above, like just in midair, just standing there. But I'm not standing on anything like hard. Like I can't feel anything that I'm standing on.
Yeah.
But my feet are flat. They're not they're not draping down because of gravity. They're like I feel like I'm on something. And I remember kind of like moving around, kind of shifting around, looking around, and then all of a sudden like I hear like something, and I kind of like look up. And I remember just looking up and seeing blue sky, and then woof, I just shot like straight up into the sky, like just complete, like you could like so fast you can't see anything, just a blur. It's just blur of colors. There's blue and white clouds, and boom, all of a sudden I was in this like tunnel. And the only way to explain the tunnel is imagine a tube made out of like stained glass. So it had angular shapes, but it was round, and you're kind of going through this tube. Not like super fast anymore, so it kind of slowed down a little bit to like a smaller pace, almost a pace that I was more comfortable with. It was almost like, okay, I arrived somewhere, calmed down, like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, it was like this trippy looking tube, and it didn't go on for that long. I would say maybe like 10, 15 seconds. It didn't really feel rushed. It didn't really feel, too slow. It was just, your mind was almost too involved in the colors, and you're trying to see how the shapes line up and how they match, but you can never actually pick out a certain shape or pattern. There was never a pattern. There was never anything like that. It was the craziest thing. I remember getting through that tube and then out of that tube, nothing. Just black, just nothing. I can't see myself. I can't like speak or anything like that. I don't hear myself, but I hear myself in my head. Like, you talk to yourself vocally. It's different than talking to yourself in your head.
Yeah.
And some people actually have different voices, because you always hear yourself on playback like, oh, is that what I sound like? Because in your head, you sound completely different.
I hate how I sound.
So then I'm there in just complete darkness, just nothing. And it's the weirdest thing. And you're just like, there's no perception of anything. You have nothing. And all of a sudden I just start seeing little lights kind of flicker on. Just boom, 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 boom. And then as more kind of pop on, it gets faster and faster and faster. And then the next thing I know, boom, I get pulled right back into my own body. I wake up and I go, that was the craziest dream ever.
So you ruled it as a dream?
I don't know, because the more research I do, like, I don't know how many times I've told people this story and how many times they kind of come back and go like, oh, that's kind of weird. I've had very similar experience to that. And what's weird about it is that it's that tunnel. Everyone always has a similar type of tunnel. Dude, it might not be the stained glass tunnel, but it's always a tunnel of some sort.
As you were telling the story, and when you got to the tunnel part, I was like, I feel like I had a dream more than once as a kid that I didn't rule as a good dream, like it was a bad dream to me. And there being a tunnel similar to like what you're describing, but like maybe because of my own perception, like I was afraid.
Right.
I was like,
yeah.
I don't know what the fuck is happening. This is terrifying.
Yeah.
Interesting. So,
but people always have like very, very similar like stories where they're either, well, a lot of them are also induced by psychedelics like drugs and things like that. So like mushrooms or ayahuasca or something like that, or DMT. But it's all the same chemical shit that goes on in your head anyway. And some people can actually get to that certain state just through meditation, or even like get into like what they call like a flow state. And that's kind of where I felt like when I was kind of like laying down and I just kind of let my mind go, I was almost in a certain state of mind where, yeah, maybe, what do you call it? Like astral projection or whatever it is. Did I astral project into a different dimension? Who knows? But it was as real to me as me being here right now.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like, that's what sells me on it, is that, like, it didn't feel like a dream to you. It felt like...
Oh, it was real. And the fact that, like, I know the brain is an incredible tool, but the fact that I could see, like, in detail, exact objects in the room, exactly how they were placed. Because when I woke up, I was a little freaked out. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I'm looking out the room, but everything is exactly how I saw it. Like, I actually got up and stood in that position in this dimension.
Yeah.
I stood in that position looking around, and it was exactly how it was. Like, every object that was on my desk is the same. No. It was, because the weird thing is when I actually stood up and I stood in that place, that's when it started coming more back to me. Because I woke up and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. You know, when you wake up, you're like, oh, what was that dream? Like, you try to, like, get that little thought again.
Yeah, and, you know, in dreams, usually there's certain things, and I've heard and read about this, like, briefly, haven't done a lot of research, that are never there. Like, I could be wrong on this, but I want to say, like, light switches. There's never a light switch.
I never looked for a
on the
light
walls
switch
or anything in your dreams.
Yeah. Well, faces is the big thing. A lot of people can't see faces. They see the person and they recognize who the person is, but they don't actually see the actual face.
Yeah.
It's more like a blurred out version of your face.
Yeah, it's almost like your brain is trying to make their face look like who you recognize.
Right. Correct. Yeah. Because it's hard to think of faces like if you're an artist or you're like a painter or whatever, and you're doing like a portrait. Trying to draw a face or paint a face, it's hard without having a reference. Most artists, what they do is they'll take eyes from one model and then a nose from another model and lips from another model, combine it to make a new face, or maybe make small tweaks here and there, maybe make the eyes a little bit larger or smaller, and it changes the face. But even like a millimeter of something being changed on a face is recognizable to somebody that sees and knows them. But yeah, like something like that though, like, I don't know. So many people have that same experience, and you always hear like with the frequencies, like your brain is literally just an antenna, and if you tune to a different frequency, meaning if you get into like that flow state or that state of mind, could you theoretically hit that next dimension, that next frequency?
And
right?
Well, that's why I think it's kind of all connected, because I feel like the whole cymatics is just a vibration, and then the vibration is just a sound, and but when you breathe, or the ohm,
yep,
if you will, that's another sound. So which is directly correlated to meditation.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely is.
And if you can, that's a vibration. So if you vibrate yourself for enough time at a certain frequency, I'm not saying does your body do that and you shoot up into fucking space and go through this weird tunnel or anything, but
I fucking wish that'd be awesome.
Maybe your consciousness.
But yeah, maybe that would. And for my particular experience of me having that weird and when I say weird, it's weird because it's not typically how I go to sleep. Like when I go to sleep, it's like, okay, now I have to go to sleep because I have to, not because I'm tired. But usually when I'm overly tired, I just fall asleep right away.
Right.
This was that weird kind of. Yeah, this was that weird kind of state where I was like, I'm tired, but my brain is still very active. And it's that weird state when you start falling asleep, your brain is going places that you normally don't go to. And that's why I always feel like, did I go somewhere? And the more research I do, it's starting to become more apparent that there is a physical place, not physically here in this dimension, but a physical place that people or consciousness that can go to, and it's a collective consciousness, which is weird. And I try to interpret it as best as I can, and I've talked to some people about it, and they kind of gave me maybe a little bit storylines here and there, and I'm trying to piece it together, but I'm wondering that tunnel that I go through, right, is that the bridge, essentially, the frequency that I've locked onto, and then I ride that frequency for essentially tune it in, kind of like a radio dial, like tune it in, get to that right frequency, boom, come out, it's nothing but darkness, but then I'm greeted with these lights, and the lights kind of pop on rapidly, almost like stars, essentially, pop, and as fast as they go, and then essentially right when it starts to fill up is when I left. But could those stars be other conscious beings coming to greet me, be like, hey, look who just arrived, welcome, Like
Maybe, dude.
it's hard to interpret like what the hell it is, like
Yeah, I mean,
because it's
there's
not.
no
It
way
wasn't
for you to
space.
know.
I didn't shoot into space and then the stars appeared to me. It wasn't that. It didn't look like that because, like we know what that looks like from our own dimension. It was different. It was darkness and black, but there was no perception. There was no up. There was no down. It's super hard to explain. Like I can't explain. There's no body. There's no eyes. Like because there's nothing to see. But you know you were there. You would just
Because
thought.
you are not your body or your mind, or
Right.
your brain.
You were just a
You are
thought.
consciousness.
It was the
You are
craziest
that
thing.
Spirit, if you will.
Out of everything, going through the wall, flying through this thing, this crazy ass tunnel, that might be the hardest thing to explain, or the hardest thing to grasp is nothing. Like it was like nothing. I don't want to like I can't explain it. Like
I mean,
You
we can use our imaginations.
yeah, you're gonna have to
I
because
feel like I could kind of understand what you're saying, but
There
obviously
was-
I've never
yeah,
been there.
there's
so,
you gotta go.
yeah, someday.
You know what's funny is I try to go back. Like I try like maybe through like meditation. I tried through meditation. I tried through like thought. Try to get to that point. I tried through cannabis. I've gotten close with cannabis, but nothing quite like the nothingness of it. It's more or less just kind of colors.
I feel like you can't. I feel like it's something that you can't. It doesn't happen when you want it.
No, exactly.
Like it just kind of happens randomly. Like
I wonder why.
I don't know. And sometimes like man, real quick story. There's one night where I was moving out of my house and my friends were all like, "Awesome, you're moving up to Boston with us. Let's go out and celebrate." We go out and celebrate. I get super fucking drunk, super drunk. Throw up in my car, like it's awful. But the next day, I wake up and I don't know how to describe it. Like, yes, I was probably still a little drunk, but I'm not attribute like it the feelings that I was like how I felt had nothing to do with being drunk or not caring. It was like I was just in this state of mind where I was talking to my mother about like everything is okay and like
What?
like love is the only thing that like matters in anything and like I don't know, I can't describe it. I was just like my mind was just at this place where I was just like everything is okay. I felt like I was untouchable. Like,
Right. Yeah.
like nothing could bother me, could hurt me. And then
Maybe you're just a really lovey
I
drunk.
went back to sleep because I was fucking up all night.
Exhausted.
When I woke up, that feeling was gone.
Sucks, right? It's like
And I was
why?
just fucking hungover.
Yeah. Everything sucks. It's like that's the balance. That's the wave right there. You have the love and then the hangover. It goes down.
Yeah, maybe that's the best way of describing it.
I had to
I was
balance
at the
it
peak
out.
Of
Yeah.
like a good wave. Like,
Yeah.
And maybe it was just because I went and let loose and like got stress off my chest or whatever. Maybe it's because I puked everything out.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But what's cool about that is like I was actually looking into like sacred geometry and like the Fibonacci sequence in Phi, and if you actually kind of plot out like the what is it the not the flower of life, what's the smaller one, the seed of life?
Yes.
Which is like only the just like the bands. It's not like the full circle. If you plot that out, like that pattern onto like the Fibonacci sequence, and you actually will, and you do it in the space of the Fibonacci sequence, it actually gets closer and closer to the Fibonacci sequence, but it never actually gets there, which is weird. And it's almost like what you're saying is like because you technically have to balance the positive, so the positive with the negative. So every time you try to go across that line, you get closer and closer to perfect, but you never actually do, because your action always has a similar reaction to it in life. And I remember like seeing something like that when I was reading about this, and I was like, it kind of makes sense a little bit, where kind of like what you had, where you had this high and then like a low afterwards. You're kind of like, I feel kind of gross and puked a lot, right? And kind of karma works the same way in the Hinduism, where it's like you do a good deed, you're gonna get good deeds back to you. You're trying to hit that perfect linear line, and from everything we know, 1 point, 1 to 618 being phi. We call that the golden ratio, the God code. We call it all these different things. Is that the perfect frequency to hit, but we can never really hit it in our own lives? You know what I'm saying? Because we can never plot it out in this dimension. So is like something like the Fibonacci sequence something of the next dimension?
I mean, if we think about what the Fibonacci sequence represents, it's infinity, right?
Yeah, there's
infinitely large,
yeah.
infinitely small.
You can go both ways.
Yeah, and then that guy who created that program on the computer that was essentially the Fibonacci sequence, and when it went onto a screen, it was like it had this pattern. It was constantly zooming in towards one point, and it just kept creating the same exact pattern over and over, which kind of shows us that, like, this is my perspective on it, like, that infinity can be in anything, like anything is infinity, and then that ties into the collective consciousness thing,
right?
And, like,
right.
And I know I'm just kind of rambling like a high person right now.
I think we have been all show, but in the top of the show,
that's what we do.
Yeah. In the top of the show, I had a little thing that I wrote about it, and in it I wrote, "We are a collective consciousness united in one under the same frequency," meaning, yeah, we're all in this together, and if we tune to the same frequency, is it possible that your thoughts can be my thoughts and my thoughts can be your thoughts? Meaning we think alike, right? So being our brain as a tuner receives impulses, right, and it reacts based on those impulses. Could we sync up impulses together somehow and think collectively as a race?
Well, I mean, let's take today as an example. We were texting before I came over here about, I'll be there soon. Sorry, it's taken a while, and you mentioned something about, like, if you have a bomb to drop, or like you.
No, I just
or like you said something regarding the podcast, and then for whatever reason it was something about the dimensions and, like, experiencing dimensions.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, like, I was like, maybe we should just do mushrooms on the show one day. I was like, be on mushrooms the whole time.
It'd be the worst
and
show
then
ever.
I text you that, and you reply to me. I was just thinking about that.
I was literally just thinking that was in my head when I read it.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So, like, anybody could be like, oh, that was just coincidence, but I don't fucking believe in coincidence. I don't think it's any.
No,
such
and
thing.
Could we have gotten on the same frequency because
Same wavelength,
we're
yes.
united to do a similar task, meaning doing this show together.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're thinking about a similar thing, so wherever we are, maybe the fucking electromagnetic waves are intertwined. I think it's totally possible.
It is, and there's a lot of religions out there in ancient civilizations that have been talking about this for millennia, right? Like we see the sacred geometry in all these different temples around the world. You have all these beliefs of, the Merkaba, the Tree of Life in many, many religions, going down through even some of the stories of cataclysms and events going through the Bible and, through other sacred texts kind of describing similar things. So it technically could all just be the same thought in a sense, right? Meaning, like, we're all talking about the same thing in every religion, just kind of slightly different here and there because maybe
I think that's
lost
exactly
some stuff through the years, because there's always translation issues. Like if I translate, if I ask you to translate something into Spanish, it's not exactly what I told you. The syntax is, or the thought is roughly the same, but the syntax is different.
Yes.
Then if I ask you to change that to Japanese and then to German and then back to English, it's a game of international telephone at that point, but
it's not gonna be the same.
it won't be the same.
Yeah.
It's even though we know those languages and we know the proper translations of those languages, it's not going to be quite the same if you went to every Somebody's got to have done that. We should do that. We should make that project happen. Play an international game of telephone. Get one person from one country around the world, or at least like 20 countries. Put out a sentence and have them just translate it as they see it, not throw it into Google, because I guess theoretically we could do that as well. Just throw it into Google, but that's AI versus human interaction, because humans can decipher the difference between, red and red, meaning like I read a book or the color red.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
But I guess technically it's spelled different too. Read and read, yeah. Read and read, yeah. So things like that where AI might not be able to pick up or translate it incorrectly. Because the word is the same, but there might be two words in a different language. So
You should try that. It's a good idea.
yeah. We need more international viewers.
Yeah, someday. Knock on wood.
Yeah, and I don't know how many people are translating this show, but right now it's only in English, so we're going to be translating from English to English. But no, it goes down the rabbit hole quite a bit. Like you came to me about Cymatics, and I was like, I don't really know much about it. I started researching it, and then
You spent all night.
yeah, literally all night. Like from I think I started at like 6:30. I think is when I texted you, right?
It was more like 5:30.
5:30, yeah. And I researched pretty much up until about 12:30 that night, and then
You were like, oh my god, I'm so deep into this right now.
and then this morning I finished the book. So I did half the book last night and half the book this morning. So I put in probably a solid, 7-8 hours just going down the rabbit hole in this. And what we covered is...
See, the physical copy of the book is cool because it also has pictures and diagrams in it.
Well, that's what the internet's for.
Yeah.
Because, here's the thing, right? So I'm listening to the book, and then he'll mention something, and then I would have to, write a little note, and then pause the book, and then go research about that. And then, that would be, a half an hour, and then get back into it, and then 5 minutes more into the book, research something else. But when you start researching all these things, it is all connected. And what it pretty much all is connected to is, look into sacred geometry, look into vibrations. This picture that I'm showing right now, we showed this last week. This is the Merkaba.
But look at all the geometry within this picture.
This is a beautiful picture. And this is the Samuel Farrand image that we talked about last week. And amazing work that he did. And this is literally frequencies. So it's almost the 3D depiction of a frequency or a sound wave, but it's also sacred geometry because it's the exact same plots essentially. And then what the artist did here is he kind of put the human figure in there, kind of showing how it balances with the chakras and the Merkaba. And the human spirit. And it's very interesting. It's super interesting. And if you don't know where to start with sacred geometry, one thing that I found super interesting about it is when humans are born, they're born out of a single cell, but then you know how it multiplies, and it keeps multiplying. It actually multiplies very much like the flower of life. Exactly. But what's cool about it is it grows from the heart out. So the heart comes before the brain. So your heart is actually technically the center of everything, and it blooms from there and creates, hands, fingers, legs.
And that's if you look at this picture, that's where
the center is.
Chakra is, yeah.
Exactly. So if you're not really sure where to start with all this, because it is a very broad subject, and there's so much
But on that note, if you want to research heart math, that's also amazing.
Yeah. So maybe start there. I got into that part fairly early in my research, and I went down probably 2, 3, 4 hours just into that, and it was amazing stuff. And if you're interested in this stuff, by all means, check it out. Just say,
that's what we're here for. We're just here to
sacred geometry in the heart.
Show you hey, these are some cool things you should be interested in. But I think that pretty much wraps it up for today.
I think so. I think, what do we do? Almost an hour? Or a little bit over an hour. All right. Well, we'll see you until next time.
Yeah, Jack's starting to bark too, so it's time to go. Bye, guys.